Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Seek This Week. Every Thursday night, we hold a town hall meeting where we provide updates on federal, state, and district educational guidance. We also give you updates on mental health, evaluations, transition planning, community issues, and other important educational issues that are important to families of children with a disability. Our special guest tonight is Denise Marshall, the Executive Director of Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, COPA. I'm Barbara DeStinti. I'm the president of SEEK, and I'm the parent of a child in special education.
Hi, I'm Julie Swanson. I'm a special education advocate. I am the outgoing president of SEEK. I remain on the executive board, and I have a young adult son who is on the autism spectrum.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Forte. I'm a special education attorney. I also serve on the executive board of SEEK as the board secretary, and I also have a child with a IEP.
Hi, I'm Andy Feinstein. I'm a special ed lawyer in Mystic, Connecticut. I am also the co-chair of government relations for COPA, the national organization. And our guest tonight, Denise Marshall, is the chief executive officer now of COPA. We're honored to have her. I also am treasurer of SEEK and do legislative affairs for SEEK. And I do have a kid who's perfectly delighted that his special education distance learning program is over for the year.
Hi, I'm Jen Laviano. I'm also on the executive board of SEEK, and I am the co-chair of the COPA Attorneys Committee, and also thrilled to have Denise here because she is always a font of incredible information. So.
Our chat is moderated by Jerry Fleming, Helen Taylor, and John Flanders, all on the SEEK board. So if you have any questions, you can ask them and they will answer them right away. Our mission at SEEK is to advocate, educate, and legislate for the 80,000 children in special education in Connecticut. We also work on behalf of kids with 504 plans and kids that should be identified but are not. You can find out more about SEEK at our website, seekct.com. Just a reminder, we are a nonprofit organization. We're all volunteers, but we do accept donations on our website because we incur some operating costs in order to lobby in Hartford and increase our accessibility for our audience. Your donations go directly to these activities. In fact, because of donations for Seek This Week audience, we've been able to provide a Spanish translator for our webinars. Our next webinar is going to be July 9th. Just so you know, we're actually taking next Thursday off. There will be no Seek This Week in July, but we will have some webinars. So July 9th, we're going to have a financial planning for people with disabilities webinar. And then July 16th, we will have a behavior supports webinar as well. We'll have more information as we go. Jen, give us our disclaimer. It's my favorite part.
So yes, this is the part where we explain that while many of us are attorneys, this is not intended to be legal advice. We also ask that if you're going to post on the chat, you keep two things in mind. One is that this is a public forum, and if you are posting something about your individual child, just keep in mind that that is information that could be accessible to anyone who's watching tonight or paying attention. And secondly, please keep your questions as general as possible. We want to give as much information to as many families as possible. And if it's very, very specific to your individual child, it's probably not going to be applicable to more families. So we ask you to keep those questions general, and this is not legal advice. That's our caveat.
Thank you. All right. So, Andy, did anything happen in Connecticut today about school?
Yeah, not much. At 4 o'clock, Governor Lamont and Commissioner Cardona announced their reopening plans. And I will say that most of us in the community, our side, school officials, union officials, were just shocked at what they said. I'm going to take you through the deck of PowerPoint slides that Commissioner Cardona used today, so you can get a better flavor for exactly what they're saying. But I will not be able to restrain myself from making comments about that. So this, where is this? This should be sharing it, right?
Yep, it's great.
This is a nice cover slide. We don't know who those kids are, but whatever. Let's see. So the first of the 3 or 4 overriding tenets of this reopening plan is that we want a healthy and safe environment. And there were, in fact, a lot of efforts to reach out and talk to people. The commissioner talked to us on a number of occasions about this. There were the Regional Education Service Center panels. There was a reopening task force. Nevertheless, what is being proposed was not what was being discussed in any of those fora. But one thing that did keep on coming up, and it is noted here on this first slide, is that the emotional health of children returning to school is paramount. That kids have been out of school at the time of reopening for at least 6 months in many cases. The structure of school has been missing, the structure of education has been missing, and until children are emotionally regulated, and this is not just special ed kids, this is all kids, until kids are emotionally regulated, then they're not going to learn. And so that is clearly a part of what the state is doing. The next slide, and really the driving force behind this, is this rather fortuitous data that shows Connecticut in the lead in the country in reducing number of cases. This announcement was planned for today a while ago, but I'm sure that the folks who were planning it were perfectly delighted that they could be able to show Connecticut here in dark green, and the only state in the country that is in dark green for more than a 50% drop. That said, you know, there's some serious increases taking place around the country, and sort of my feeling that if Connecticut is thinking that COVID is over, that's a very sad mistake. So the guiding principles are: first, health and safety. Number 2, allowing all students the opportunity to return into school full-time in the fall. So ideas of hybrid and ideas of mixed, of half days and all that sort of stuff in smaller classrooms seem to have gone out of the window. The idea is they'll be monitoring both disease rates in school children and in the general community. And if it reaches certain undefined levels, then stricter protocols take place. And indeed, if somebody in a class, a cohort as they're called, tests positive, presumably the entire cohort is instructed to stay home in quarantine for 14 days. The equity and access piece, the commissioner is really committed to making sure that every child in Connecticut has a device and has internet connectivity. And whether or not kids are back in school, he was quite clear that that's a goal for next year, to make sure there's 100% coverage. He talks about communication, and that he's working with teachers and with school staff on this. And indeed, the whole plan sets out the basic rubric of a complete reopening. Districts are supposed to devise their individual plans, come back with budgets to the state in a limited period of time, and then the state's going to issue further and more specific guidance. Let me say that what was issued today was these slides, a one-page executive order, and some rhetoric at the press conference. Monday, more detailed stuff is supposed to come out from the State Department of Education. And one of those pieces is a piece of evaluation of all children, let's not use the word evaluation, assessment of all children, to determine where they are on curriculum and what kind of and what kind of studying they need to be doing, what kind of curriculum needs to be imposed. And then the issue about the last guiding principle is physical safety and social emotional well-being of students when they're not in school. Let me get into a little more details on that now. So districts should plan for fall reopening with in-school return for all students all day, every day. No partial re-entry. There will be, effort to maximize social distancing, frequent hand washing, face coverings, and enhanced disinfectant. And then this plan will ratchet up to the extent that there are increasing infections. I teach a group of senior teachers, and I asked them yesterday what they think they're going to be doing on September 10th, and a couple of them said, we'll be back in school, but instead of being teachers, we're going to be cleaning ladies. We're going to have so much time spent sanitizing that we're not going to have time for teaching. We'll see whether that's true. The whole basis of this is cohorts, that kids stay with a small group of kids. Those are the only ones they have contact with. This is absolute in the kindergarten group through grade 8 level. In the high school level, that's not possible as kids go between classes. Facial coverings mandatory for staff and students during the school day. How that's going to be enforced is anybody's guess. Busing. The idea, this is the biggest single cost issue on reopening, and particularly when the CDC guidelines said that a bus that held 60 could only hold 15 with the proper social distancing. Connecticut seems to think that's unimportant. And so as long as there's no or minimal spread, the plan is to have school buses at full capacity. And only if the full, if we're seeing a spread through either in the school or through the general community, will we go to some sort of reduced capacity. But each bus has to have a monitor on it, particularly for younger grades. And again, face covering on the bus. And there are some students who are going to be great at face covering, but the students I know, particularly in the kindergarten, first, second, third grade, are not going to be tolerating that. But we'll see how that works out. The idea of ramping up and ramping down, that this is a very optimistic plan. I might call it risky. The district should prepare for full reopening. Alternative plans, including a hybrid model and enhanced remote learning, have to be on the books and planned in case there is a community spread. Again, what constitutes a community spread is not yet defined, but that is the sort of safety valve on this. Further, the commissioner said that if a parent refuses for whatever, for reasons of their safety or other people in the household, refuses to send their student back to a school, that the school would be responsible for providing remote learning for that student. But he also said that we're really going to encourage parents to send their kids back to school. So this slide talks about comprehensive plan details on Monday and updates as we go along. I think that's it. So let me stop sharing. So that's the plan. The two unions, two teachers unions, were rather appalled by this and issued a joint statement saying it raises serious health and safety concerns, and that's something we've heard from teachers pretty constantly. I would recommend to anybody who's got interest that the entire press conference is available on CT-N, the state television network, and it's really worth watching this in detail. As I said, this came as a complete shock to us. There are a couple of ways to look at it. This is clearly the least expensive alternative for the state, and that may have been a guiding factor. It also is a way for the governor to say, look what a great job we've done on suppressing the virus in Connecticut, and because of that, we can take the lead in having full school for all. The final point I'm going to make before signing off here is that we continually are asked by the governor's office and by the commissioner, what is the parents' position on school reopening? And we are in a position of saying there is no parent position. Some parents we talk to want exactly this sort of plan. Both schools reopened September 1st or August 31st. And there are other parents who say, no way, my kid's not going to school in this environment. It's just too dangerous, and every shade in between. So all we can say is we need to protect the rights of students, and particularly students with disabilities, as schools reopen. And that's what we've been doing. So I'll pass it on to Jen.
So, yes. The other update we have at the state level is this. Last week, we reported that on June 10th, the United States District Court for the District of Connecticut ruled in the favor of a class action of students who alleged that it was a violation of federal law for the state of Connecticut to arbitrarily end special education services for students who were in their 21st year on June 30th of their 21st year. And the court reversed the position of the state and in fact said that students who have IEPs should receive services through their 22nd birthday. For some students, this provides almost an entire additional year for them of services. That decision came down 5 days after the state had already issued guidance on exiting students who were aging out, as we use that term. And so to their credit, they have subsequently issued additional guidance in conformity with the decision of the court. This is very important. I hope a lot of people are going to spread the word on this because as we've talked about, there's an additional entitlement for sometimes months and almost a year for some students to services. And this is what the guidance said, among other language about how the case may be appealed. Even if that happens, the state would have to take some measures to get the court to essentially say that they don't have to follow the order while they appeal, which is not necessarily an easy thing to obtain. But this is what the state has directed districts to do. And they say that this decision will supersede prior guidance issued by the Connecticut State Department of Education related to that law and practice. This is the money shot. Schools will be expected to make special education and related services available for eligible students until those students turn 22 or receive a diploma, or upon notification that this decision is subject to appeal and a legal stay. So for those parents who are asking themselves the question, if they have a 21-year-old, should I accept a diploma if that had been the plan? The short answer is probably not. We would say definitely not without at least consulting with somebody who can advise you as to what the next steps would be. So that's great news. I have a number of clients who are getting months and in some cases many months of additional services as a result of this decision. And the state has issued guidance to districts that they must follow the law of the land or the law of our land anyway. So
Now, Jen, this is retroactive for a few years? Isn't this a couple years?
So yes, there was compensatory education that was ordered by the court, and there's a procedure outlined in the decision for how that compensatory education should be determined. That we don't yet know, but yes, students who did not receive services till their 22nd birthday and have already been exited are entitled under the decision to a compensatory education. What that's going to look like, we do not yet know. But it's one of the best pieces of news we've had in the last several months. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Babs, I'm just seeing a question here really quick that's coming up. And it's in response to the school reopening plan that Andy just went through. If a child cannot wear a mask, which is one of the requirements that the state is proposing as the guidance, if a child cannot wear a mask and has a medical note, will they be allowed to enter the school building, or will they be forced to remain home and continue e-learning?
And the commissioner was absolutely clear on that a medical need not to wear a mask would govern, and the children who had those medical requirements could attend school without a mask.
Right. And, it leads to a bigger issue of whether or not our teachers are being there to, police or monitor mask wearing, and should that be their role, or should their role be more obviously to what it used to be, and that is to simply to educate our kids, and children that are not allowed or not able to wear a mask be, perhaps in a different cohort or being educated at home. So we're still trying to figure out this guidance.
Right.
And I believe we're going to be putting out a letter in response to this.
If I could just pipe in here and just add one thing, and this is sort of my torch that I'm carrying these days, and that is, if you have a child who you want them to be in school and they cannot wear a mask or they can't tolerate it for long periods of time, you should pick up the phone this summer, ask for a IEP goal and an objective around whatever viral safety and health skill your child does not have. The summer is a perfect time to be working on this. You can ask your team to help you with parent training. If it's not an IEP goal, you can ask for the IEP to be amended. But please take advantage of that, because if your child has the potential to be in school on day one, and that's what you want, but any of these viral health and safety skills are barriers. In my opinion, these are now functional skills. These are the new essential life skills, viral health and safety skills, the new essential life skills can absolutely be on the IEP if in fact you don't have the skill and then it doesn't even allow you to be in school. Forget about making progress, you can't even access it. So that's my little torch I've been carrying. So please, if that's your child and that relates to you.
Well, I just want to add to that, that what the commissioner is talking about is an exception if you have a medical reason. But there are a lot of kids, and frankly, I don't like wearing a mask for extended period of time. It's itchy, it's hot. And there are going to be a lot of kids who just aren't going to wear masks for extended periods of time. There is, as far as I know, there's no protection for those kids. If they take off their mask, what happens? Are they thrown out of school? I don't know.
Another quick question here. It has to go with cohorts, and if we're having to educate kids in groups of cohorts, one of our followers here who is a reading specialist teacher is asking, how is she supposed to pull children out for reading services if they're being compelled to stay within their cohort? And that's another good point that we don't really have guidance or answers for you on yet, other than to say, as I think Andy said, this is really a shock to all of us, this proposed guidance that just came out.
Well, the commissioner did say that there could be pullouts for specific services. Presumably, a kid who's in a cohort would be pulled out to a one-on-one with the therapist. The CDC guidelines talked about a maximum of 10 plus a teacher in a room. Those don't seem to be applicable to this plan. We'll have to wait till Monday to see what they say about that. But in that situation, if you had, 6 students, 4 paras, and a teacher in the room, the learning specialist could not come into the room because that would exceed the requirements.
Yep.
Inquiring minds would like to know.
We're getting a lot of questions.
There's a lot, well, there are definitely, and I'm sure, and one of the things that we did want to tell people about, and we've been talking about, and it is a torch we are carrying all summer long. We are determined to get a documented interim IEP form for you to be able to fill out if distance learning is your only option or becomes your option, because it is the new normal. It's going to be part of education and special education for a while, and there is no reason we can see that we don't have it written down. So we want that. We are hoping that in August, when we come back, we will be able to give you a form and say, this is when you're not in the physical building. Because it sounds, again, unless we have some miraculous change, there are a lot of barriers to getting back in the building and business as usual. So
I want to say one more thing. Our saying that we don't know is not to tell you not to ask the questions. Indeed, exactly the opposite. You know, the commissioner and the head of the special ed bureau and others keep on telling us they want to hear what parents have to say about this, and we will communicate that to them. And a lot of the issues you're raising may be things they haven't thought about, and so we'll get those. We'll get those on the mix. We may not like the answer we get, but we promise to communicate them to the powers that be on your behalf.
Yes. And even while we are not doing Seek This Week during July, I will be checking the email. I'm not going anywhere. I was supposed to be in Italy today. It's okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll be checking the email. So, all right. So we are going to move on from our state focus to our special guest. Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much for joining us. You need to, there you go. Look at this. You're such a Zoom pro, I can tell. So if you could tell us about COPA's mission, so Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys, or is it Attorneys and Advocates? Which is first?
Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates.
And Attorneys first. All right.
Yes.
So if you could tell us about COPA's mission and how your organization impacts families, and of course, we are always interested about families in Connecticut in particular.
Sure. COPA is a nonprofit, and we have our national organization that's mission is to protect the legal and civil rights of students with disabilities and their families. That's any student with a disability, any family member or parent, siblings, folks who are interested in the mission, who are advocating for the rights of students with disabilities. And we are in every state across the country and a couple of the territories. And we have 2,700 members right now that are, dues paying active members. But we have thousands, 5 to 10,000 at any given time that sign up for our lists to get our newsletter or interact with us on Facebook. So we welcome. We're one of the only organizations, I think, that is a member, has as members attorneys, advocates, parents, related professionals, students, and anyone really, unless you work for a school district more than 50% of your time, that's interested in protecting the rights of students with disabilities and their families.
Terrific. Thank you. Jeff, I think you're up next.
Sure. Hi, Denise. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Obviously we've had COVID around for several months, but what are you seeing from, the national perspective on behalf of COPA members to be the 3 biggest issues right now facing special education?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'm going to put them in buckets, but each one kind of has to be teased out a little. And that's that the same challenges that faced us before COVID also faced us now that COVID has arrived. And those are being able to have equity in access to and benefit from education, being able to or having the full partnership that the IDEA and other federal laws intend in terms of educating students with disabilities. So that meaning that parents are to be meaningful partners in their child's team and have a voice in the decisions that affect their child. And the third being individualization and the receipt of the services and supports that are in the individualized education program or IEP for each student in a way that enables them to make progress in and benefit from their education. In the law, that's called being able to receive a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. So those challenges were in place before COVID, as my husband calls it, the COVID arrived, and they just took a different form. So one of the things that we saw from the very beginning was issues around equity. So let me first say that in times of closure for reasons like this, federal laws are still in effect. They still are in effect in Connecticut. They are in effect in Maryland. They are in effect in Hawaii. It doesn't matter. There's no waiver to those laws, no reasons outlined under the IDEA why students and families would not have the same rights that they had when schools were open. The only way that a change could be made to that is if Congress actually made a change to the law, which has not happened. So all of the rights under the IDEA, under Section 504, under the ADA, and any other federal law that protects students with disabilities and their families are still in effect. I don't know if you want me to go into each one of those areas a little bit more and talk about what some of the issues or challenges have been.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously, because of the virus, we've seen quite clearly the inequities across the board. Can you talk a little bit more about that? We've been really touching on that in some of our previous programs, as we're seeing it, you know, play out across our state as well.
Sure. So yeah, some of the existing inequities that we know were there before, such as resource inequity, inability of some districts to be able to provide the level of distance learning that that they need to do. Families' ability to access the internet or have devices, and in some cases, not just one device, you've got entire families under the same roof who have different schedules of when they need to be on work calls, when they need to be on school events, when each child needs to dial into their individualized instruction or their group instruction. So just, you know, having the ability, and even for some families, the space or the bandwidth to really manage all of that. You know, this virus really brought out those inequities. I think another way that inequities kind of came to the forefront, and I'm sorry for those of you, I'm one of those people, and was one of those kids who doesn't sit still well. So I'm gonna try to do so, but every once in a while I'm gonna have to move around. Another way that we saw some inequities was just in the ability of families to be the teacher, to provide, you know, or the physical therapist or the speech therapist, to sit one-on-one with their child and implement whatever it was that the professional on the screen was trying to get them to do. Some students can do that perfectly fine on their own, and the family member may, you know, just have to sit near them or be in the vicinity, and others wouldn't, you know, would hide under the table whenever anything came about. So that is certainly one of the inequities that we saw.
Thanks, Denise. I'm going to hand you over to Andy for the next question.
Sure.
Well, I want to make two comments on what's been said before. First, I want to correct Babs, who said, "What does your organization do?" COPA is our organization. And secondly, you know, Connecticut's an incredibly segregated state, and the inequities fall very clearly along racial lines. And we can't talk about the inequities in the IDEA without talking about structural racism. And that is exactly what we're seeing here in Connecticut. So I just wanted to add that.
Right.
Let's go through the position papers that COPA has issued in the last few months and is in the process of issuing on this as to what our position is on various issues. I suppose the biggest one is the one that I understand you're working on now. I have no involvement in it, on compensatory education. Can you talk about what COPA's position is on compensatory education?
Yes. So, you know, again, I said earlier we were the first ones when the Department of Education put out some guidance and said that, you know, as long as schools were not providing any kind of educational opportunities to any students, they didn't have to do so to students with disabilities. And we were the first ones that held up our hands or perhaps our megaphones and said, no, that's not true. You have a contract with the family to provide this individualized education program, and you need to meet with that family, talk with them, figure out together what's feasible to implement, and do the best you can to implement that. And some districts did that, and they were able to provide different levels of intervention, different levels of instruction, options for students. And again, the families that were able to participate in that, some of them really reached a new level of partnership that they've never really achieved before, because they were truly in it together. Other districts just sent a notice and said, you will, all of your services and supports will cease, and any educational opportunity will cease right now because of the closure. And then it varied widely all across the country. So I say all that to kind of tee up this question of compensatory education. This is a term that is typically used, as our friends in the special education administrators remind us, that is typically used in litigation as something, Jen mentioned it earlier, as it related to the case that just was decided in Connecticut, that is awarded as a result of litigation or as a result of the filing of due process. And so they're trying to get people not to talk about compensatory education and saying that it's the inappropriate thing to discuss. And on some level, we would agree with that, as long as, and Andy actually put out a position paper about that earlier on, just from his own personal perspective, saying that it could be, get in the way of what's really important. And that is also our position, is that it doesn't really matter what we call it. What matters is the individual student, and that they receive what they need to receive. And compensatory education, or agreeing to provide it, is not agreeing to any level of fault. It's not saying that the district did something wrong, but just simply that there is an acknowledgement that the student did not receive the services they should have, and that, or they did not make the progress, they were not able to be at the place they would have been but for the closure. So it doesn't really matter what we call it. What's important is for the teams to get together, figure out where that student is, whether or not they've been able to benefit from or access the services and supports on their IEP, and what kinds of services at what levels they need as a result of whatever happened over the closure for them. Does that answer your question, Andy?
Okay, are you stopping there? I mean, one of the big issues is that school administrators have got it through their head that compensatory education is only available where there's a finding of fault. And that's just not the case law. And again, it's not what you call it. It's the fact that we need to provide services to take kids to where they would have been had they been provided with services during the period of closure.
Right. And some places are embracing that. I know that the governor of New Hampshire put out a memo that basically said the same thing, that students are entitled to that. The Department of Ed has put out 2 different forms of guidance saying that students are entitled to compensatory education as a result of the closures. So again, as like happens every day, there are districts and there are schools that are going to embrace the idea that they know that students didn't get what they need, and they're going to do everything they can to provide them with that. And there are other districts that are going to try to skirt the obligation in any way that they can. So it's important for us to remind families that if you feel that your child has not received a free and appropriate public education as outlined in their IEP during the course of the closures, then you should be asking that, you should be documenting that, you should be providing any information that you have or documentation that you were able to take over the closure and explain it. And it doesn't have to be for regression. They don't have to have gone backwards. They could have just not gone forward enough into what others would have expected them to do had schools remained open. So I think that's the other important thing that many school officials are trying to tell families. There has to have been a regression, and that's not the way that the law works. And I think another important point I want to tell families is that under the law, some students are entitled to extended school year services, or ESY. There have been some districts who are trying to say, well, okay, well, you can have one or the other. You can have ESY or you can have compensatory services. Again, not how the law works. If your team decides that your child would benefit from ESY, then and they do that in whatever form it's being offered in your district, in your school, and you still believe that they didn't make the progress or did end up going backward or whatever the issue, didn't receive any services during the closure, you still can ask for compensatory education.
I want to make one clear distinction here. Normally, when the IEP team meets to produce an IEP, we call them PPTs in Connecticut, but nationally they're IEP teams. You look at the present levels of performance of the child and design a reasonably challenging program to advance that child in areas of those deficits. That's the normal IEP process. What compensatory education says is you need to provide services to get the child to where he or she would have been had those services been provided during the period of closure in this case. And so it's a different, higher standard. It's greater education. Let me move to a couple of other position papers, and let me just get your comment on that. What about the situation? Now a school offers an IEP. If the parent doesn't take advantage of it, or the student doesn't take advantage of it, the school's met its obligation, and the kid is out of luck. But in this situation, it's possible that a district's going to offer a kid an IEP in the school, and for whatever reason, the parent decides the kid's not going back to school. Does that mean that the child is relieved of getting any special ed services?
No, well, we certainly are encouraging. We'd like the Department of Education to issue guidance that really clarifies that students are still entitled to FAPE if parents opt out of sending their child back to school due to concerns relating to COVID-19. And we don't mean the typical homebound kind of situation, homebound instruction situation, which is typically very light on actual instruction or services. So we mean working with the family and really figuring out a way to make sure that child gets what they need. I think that's the bottom line there. So I do think that that's something that some districts may try to, again, use as an excuse or a way to screw out of the obligation to provide a meaningful education to the individual child based on their unique circumstances, which is the language from the Andrew F. decision that I think is really pertinent here. And it means the child's circumstances, not the school's circumstances. They have also tried to use that as a way to get out of, our special circumstance, our unique circumstances in the closure prevent us from providing any kind of FAPE to any students. Wrong answer. Doesn't work.
And finally, talk about mental health, social emotional learning, the type of things that we're likely to see as kids re-enter school, and what kind of position COPA takes on that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would really dispute the fact that this closure has really been challenging for many students. I mean, granted, I always have to say there are some students who were actually thankful that they were not in the pressure of the school building or in class with the teacher, you know, telling them 200 times to stop jiggling their leg or whatever it might be. But there are many students for whom it was an abrupt disruption in their daily routine, in their sense of safety, in their understanding of the world, and they never really fully grasped what was happening or why it was so important. And one of the things, so we think it's very important that the social emotional aspect of reentry is emphasized, that there is really an emphasis on, you know, that understanding, and that it could have been for some children a real trauma to have been home for this period of time, to be cut off from their peers, from really anyone for a long time. So we want to make sure that schools are also using that approach. And, you know, I was listening to what you're talking about relating to the mask wearing. And I was thinking, you know, like here in Maryland, they've reopened the public pools and there are social distancing requirements, and you are required to wear the mask when you're moving about the pool or going to the snack bar, but you're not required to wear it when you're sitting at the table with your other family members or you're in the pool. Same thing at a restaurant here. The restaurants have begun reopening. You are required to wear it when you go in, when you're going to the restroom, that kind of thing. But when you're sitting at your table, you're not required to wear it. So, I mean, I do think that districts need to think practically as well about those kinds of issues, so as not to unduly stress out kids. I mean, they're, you know, as Andy said, for me too, if I had to wear that mask for 8 hours a day with no break of having it off there, and it was hot and stuffy, how am I going to actually focus on learning? So, you know, I think that is going to be an important component of this.
Thank you, Denise.
Okay, so Denise, thank you for coming. I've had the honor of serving with you on the COPA board for, I think, going on like 10 years now or some insane amount of time. All of it has been joyful, of course. But in the last couple of years, COPA has embarked on litigation as a plaintiff, you know, where they've actually sued various entities, including the federal government, Secretary DeVos, and joined in other civil rights organizations in doing so as well. Can you share with us some of what the lawsuits are? We don't ask you to go through everyone in great detail,
Right.
but just generally why COPA's embarked on this and what some of the results have been?
Yeah, so I think, you know, as you said, in 2018, for really the first time in our history, we made the leap, I guess, from really providing the support and training and expertise to practitioners, to attorneys, to advocates, to folks across the country, which we still do, but we also became plaintiffs in several both federal and state lawsuits, two of which, the first two that we filed were both against the federal government and, you know, the policies as but
Denise, you froze there for a second. I'm sorry to say. I'm hoping that it's going to unfreeze shortly.
Oh, she's still frozen.
Well, Secretary DeVos is very sensitive about these issues, and I'm not sure that she's not involved in the freezing.
She might be involved in the freezing.
Andy, while we're waiting for Denise, oh, there she goes. There she is. We lost it just as you were trying to explain it, Denise.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I hope I stay on. But the equity in IDEA provision requires that if districts are disproportionate. Andy said earlier that we already know through data that students with disabilities, and especially students of color, are disproportionately suspended, expelled, restrained, secluded, pushed out, arrested, anything you can think of that does not happen or doesn't happen as frequently to their white counterparts in schools. And so quite a long process was in place prior to this current administration coming in, and we had states were skirting their responsibility by making the formula in their own individual state, be whatever they wanted it to be. And many states, despite the data, were claiming that they were not in any violation of, or were not disproportionate. So there was the long process that has to follow when you're creating regulations with public comment, all that other stuff. And the regulations were to go into effect July 1 of 2018. The department, and as I started to say, and the judge agreed with us that their actions were arbitrary and capricious. They did not follow proper protocol. They did not have sound reason for their actions, and they required that those disproportionality regulations go into effect. So that was our first case. The second one we filed jointly with the National Federation of the Blind, the NAACP, and COPA filed against DeVos, and this was around their OCR manual that they again just arbitrarily changed to dismiss cases, especially if they followed a pattern.
Denise, we're police around here about acronyms. So OCR is the Office of Civil Rights, just for everyone who's listening.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. They changed their processing manual, again, just arbitrarily, and cut off any access to due process. So if your complaint was rejected, which they were doing systematically for any complaint that was filed, anyone who filed more than one complaint on a similar issue. And a big part of that was website accessibility. So they basically said, well, if there was already a complaint filed on that elsewhere, we're just going to dismiss it, which meant that they were not enforcing the law that requires all publicly funded websites to be accessible. Not only that, if you were dismissed, you had no recourse. You couldn't file an appeal, those kinds of things. So that was something we became very concerned about, and filed suit, and back in February of 2020 settled that suit, and the department reinstated the need to investigate. They reinstated the manual. They basically changed the manual back to what it was, and they gave anyone who had complaints dismissed an extension of that. So that's something we're actively monitoring. If anybody has made a complaint to OCR at the federal level, the Office for Civil Rights under the Department of Education, and your complaint was just dismissed and you don't feel like that was fair or just, that might be something to bring to our attention, because we don't necessarily trust that they're going to follow what they need to do just because the court told them to put it, I guess, politely. So that was number two. And then we have two state level actions. One is in the state of Oregon, who was routinely allowing districts to send children home, children who had behavioral issues, sending them home half day or early rather than providing them with the supports that they needed. And particularly the state threw up its hand and said, well, we sent out a memo that said you can't do this. We can't help it if districts continue to do it. And so we asserted that, yes, you can. That is your role. That is your job, and you need to be doing it. That case is still pending. The other case that we filed at the state level was against Fairfax County Schools in Virginia, who have overused or abused the imposition of restraint and seclusion on students with disabilities in their schools, sometimes in the several hundred or to 1,000 times for individual students each year, and they actually violated their own policies. So they actually have policies in place to protect students, but they failed to implement them. That case is also still pending. And the latest case that we just filed in as plaintiffs with the ACLU representing us is in relation to the Title IX regulations that Secretary DeVos just promulgated. And because we're very concerned about students with disabilities, particularly at the college level, but it also happens K through 12 in many, many schools across the country, where students with disabilities are either a victim of sexual harassment or are accused of sexually harassing. And the new regulations, in effect, made it harder for students to protect their rights to make a claim of knowing who to report to. So if they don't report to the right person in the hierarchy, then the claim can be dismissed. They took away things like the mandatory reporting of athletic coaches, that kind of thing. So significantly weakened protections for students with disabilities in particular, and other students. There are several organizations, so it's not just a student with disability issue, but it does affect all students.
Thank you very much, Denise. I really appreciate it. I know you've been working very, very hard protecting the rights of students with disabilities everywhere. They matter. So thank you. And I think Julie has a question for you.
Julie does? Julie, you got to unmute.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
So glad you could join us this evening, Denise. So nice to see you. All of us on this panel are members of SEAT, as are COPA, as are many, many of the advocates and attorneys who are living here and practicing in Connecticut. When we formed our local organization here in Connecticut, SEEK, Special Education Equity for Kids of Connecticut, we emulated ourselves very much on COPA, in that we wanted to be able to educate, advocate, and legislate, which we know you do on a national level. What we'd like to do is give you a shameless plug here, and we have all parents in our audience watching us, in addition to other folks and professionals. And we'd love for you to help parents and other folks who are watching understand why it may be beneficial for them to become a member of COPA.
Sure. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to congratulate SEEK. You certainly have become quite a force in your state. And I know that lots of folks from other states have told me that they tune in to your broadcasts on Thursday night because it's interesting and because it's informative for things that are occurring in their state. So I think that if I had to kind of boil COPA down to that one thing, it's like, look at these amazing folks that are on this screen. They're all COPA members, and there are 2,694 others across the country who are part of our network, and we are peer-to-peer kind of sharing and information and reminders just on the nuances. For example, I mentioned equity earlier on the conversation, and just when things come up like, well, my district's planning on reopening the schools, and they've made the decision that all the students with disabilities are going back first because they need more intensive services. At first, we may say, that doesn't sound too bad. But then we started thinking about it, like, wait a minute. The whole tenets of the IDEA are to be able to receive an education in the general ed curriculum with peers without disabilities. And oh yeah, they have that IEP thing that's supposed to be implemented. And oh yeah, parents are supposed to be part of the decision making. And collectively, we begin to analyze and look at and see what's working or what tactics people are trying in different states, and we're able to help each other, really. So COPA, as an organization, made a determination a couple years ago that a lot of people have been asking for state chapters, and just decided that, you know, we're a very grassroots organization. We're still very dependent on volunteers. We don't have like a big national office or building, you know, that kind of thing. We're nimble, we're able to respond to things quickly, and they decided that really putting in place administratively and for other reasons, not to go the route of having formal chapters. But that said, we have many of our members that have created chapters or groups such as SEEK, and we love to collaborate with you. I've been up to the SEEK conference thanks to your generous invitation, and that's just as fun for me as it is for others to come to our conference, because we learn, you know, we take our direction in terms of what we work on at the federal level from what we're hearing from members, from family members, from people who are calling in, and from the efforts of what's happening in the states. So vital connection, even if there's no formal relationship. Right. And I would encourage you, if you can, to be members of both. COPA has different membership levels for I said earlier on in the show, if you weren't here, that we have advocates, attorneys, related professionals, family members and parents and students, and they have different pricing levels. But we also have a scholarship option that's $5. It doesn't matter who you are or what level you're at. If you can't otherwise afford to be part of COPA, you pick that option when you go to our site, www.copa.org, and you do join us, and it will give you that option as well, because we want you part of our ranks.
Right. Well, thank you. And, you know, I know we're all members here very grateful for the national efforts of COPA. And, you know, we're picking up the torch here on a state level. As I said, trying to emulate COPA in the ways that we can. And I will just say, as a member, there's a little something for everybody, whether you're a parent, an advocate, an attorney, family member. And so speaking of the conference,
Yes.
you know, through your education efforts, that is one of the big things that you can offer parents in addition to other professionals. And so we hear, unfortunately, for the very first time, the conference that is typically held in March is going to be virtual this year. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so it is. It's sad because we do all rely on seeing each other, and that includes us and our staff at COPA, because we're not together. We all work from our homes. So, you know, and we rely on seeing each of you to rejuvenate relationships and energy. But really, just the hotel industry has been decimated by this, the travel industry. There's so many unknowns, and so we really decided that we needed to keep safety of everyone paramount. That, you know, we keep hearing that there may or may not be a resurgence in the fall. They may or may not let people, even now the travel restrictions ebb and flow. It's fine, no wait. If you come into our state, you have to quarantine for 2 or 14 days. You know, I mean, there's so much unknown and so much flux that we really couldn't responsibly plan for an event in 2021, knowing for certain that we could do so, you know, in person. But, you know, we try to look for the silver lining, and we know too that having a virtual event will hopefully mean that we can have it at a lower cost, and that people can, you know, join from wherever they are, and that they won't have to travel, and that may allow folks who aren't otherwise able to attend, especially families, to participate, because many of the sessions will happen live and also be recorded.
Right. Well, you know, I think thankfully, due to the changing times, people have gotten used to things being virtual. So there's a plus to that. And do you anticipate that there'll be any entries from people having presentations on COVID-related educational issues.
Oh, I'm sure that that is
Yeah.
definitely going to be a theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
So-
so many
Yeah.
issues related to that that we didn't even get to touch on, but yeah.
Right. So seeing that I'm the person who puts everything up on the website, I will absolutely get something up on our website about the COPA conference in March, which I'm sure I echo everyone on this panel in saying that we'd highly encourage folks to check into that. So
Great.
on to the next person. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much, Denise. We really appreciate you joining us. We are at the point, I feel a little bit like Bill Maher. I'm like, we're at the new rules. We're at the part we have some questions from people, but there was an overall theme, so I'm just gonna distill it into one.
Sure.
It's a question from parents about transportation. And this is for anybody on the panel. They specifically got a letter encouraging the parent, I guess, to waive transportation. The student, so if they were going to drive their kid themselves. I think this all may change considering today's announcement where busing is just back to normal. And some parents may say, no, thank you. I don't want to sign up for that. But what is our overall impression? What should we, talk to parents, say to them if they get a letter saying, hey, can you drive your kid yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it goes back to that partnership and individualized needs, and if that's going to be a barrier to your child being able to access a free and appropriate public education, I would say you're certainly within your rights to push back and say, hey, I can't do that. I require transportation, and it may be their, who knows what their motivation is, but and I'm sure maybe others have something they'd want to chime in about that, but there's certainly a lot that I'd like to know about how riding the bus is challenging in any normal times. And so hearing that 60, 70 kids are all going to be on the bus unsupervised, usually with just the bus driver and wearing their masks, yeah. As one of my friends wrote a very long list about things, saying I can just hear myself next year saying, no, Johnny, the mask is not a slingshot. Please take your mask off the top of your head. Why are your Cheetos coming out of the sides of your mask? You really have to, again, it's an individualized decision, but it is something that if it prohibits your child from participation, then you need to push back.
Okay, so the first point is that this has now been overtaken by today's announcement. We may go back, but the second point is that by far, in totally different levels, the cost of busing and the unavailability of buses, if we have to spread kids out on buses, was the largest single obstacle to reopening schools. We don't have a problem with parents voluntarily saying, I'm going to drive my kid to school. We do have a problem with schools pressuring parents to do that. And this is an incredible equity issue. We have families in cities without cars. They can't get their kids to school. We have very poor public transportation throughout the state. We have, in some places, rules against kids walking to school. This is a very poorly thought out proposition. If you have a school of 800 kids and 800 parents drive their kids to school, the dangers of that are pretty intense. So at the moment, I think the issue's off the table. It's probably going to come back on the table. And it's, as long as it's voluntary, that's fine. But absolutely under state law, a school district has the obligation to transport all kids to school free of charge.
Thank you, Andy. All right, so I want to remind everyone out there again, we are not back with the Seek This Week until August the 6th. So the first Thursday in August, we are back 7 o'clock to answer your questions. We'll still be answering questions over email. You can still send email questions to us at seekthisweek@gmail.com. We're happy to do that, but we're taking a little bit of a breather, and we encourage you guys to do the same because August might be, you know, a little busy.
But Babs, except for those webinars, we're sneaking in.
Just, you know, give me a minute. 2 webinars going on. Please sign up for those, at least 2. We might even have 3, but we have 2 officially. We have the financial planning webinar on July the 9th, 7 p.m. So it's 7 o'clock Thursday. So if you're used to tuning into us at 7 o'clock on Thursday, we'll still be there. July 16th, a webinar about behavioral strategies for your children. This will be a great time to help them with mask wearing, just like Julie said. So if a school, you know, is dropping the ball and isn't helping you on that one, then, you know, maybe or in our webinar, we can address that. I think that would be a great one. So what I'd love to do is go around and do our takeaways. So Denise, this is what we do. We each go and our parents get so much information and they're so overwhelmed. We try to give them one little piece of advice to hold on to, action step or whatever they want to say until the next Seek This Week. So Jen, you get to go first.
Okay, so here's mine for this week. I wrote a letter on my own behalf, not having to do with SEEK, to our Bureau of Special Education last week because I've been participating in a number of virtual mediations. So mediations are required to be available to families under federal law, where parents can try to resolve the disputes that have arisen at the IEP team level. And see if they can come to an agreement with their school districts. And for years, the way it's done in Connecticut is you all go to the Board of Education or the City Hall where the town is located, including the mediator from the state, and we spend virtually all day in a conference room waiting for answers and offers and counter offers, and it's pretty onerous. The parents have to spend the whole day there. They often, if they have an attorney or an advocate, are spending a lot of money. They're also on the turf, literally, of the school district. There's a power dynamic that I've always felt has been intimidating to families, and my letter to the state was, I want to move to virtual mediation always. Parents don't have to take the whole day off of work. If they have childcare issues, they don't have to worry about them. And that important power dynamic, I think, has really changed. And I see no reason really why that shouldn't also be true for IEP meetings. Of course, there's a lot of value to in-person conversations, but especially when we don't know what the health risks are of in-person meetings, I see no reason that we shouldn't really seriously consider IEP meetings being done virtually. I think there's some comfort that a family feels that they don't feel when they're literally the guest of the school district in the meeting. And so my takeaway is give some serious thought down the road to whether you might want to start asking to have your IEP meetings done virtually even when schools reopen.
Great. Julie, you're next.
Well, and sorry, Babs, I didn't mean to think that you weren't going to plug our webinars. I just got a little nervous. So, you know, I can't help but think with Denise here that we are representing advocacy on our state level, and Denise is representing advocacy for students with disabilities on a national level. And so I think of that phrase, you know, think globally, act locally, right? And that, so not only do we have here incredible advocates nationally, we're trying to do what we can with you on the state level. And just to remind you that you are the advocate for your own child's IEP, and that you need to think locally and advocate for your own child. And we know that you are, but I just couldn't help think of that with Denise being our guest tonight.
Thank you, Julie. All right, Andy, I'm going to have you go next because I forgot there's one important piece of that we forgot to talk about, a little SEEK bit of news.
So SEEK this week sent a letter to the legislature asking that we eliminate uniformed police officers from being in the public schools, SROs, and instead use those resources to hire mental health professionals, to hire social workers, to hire guidance counselors. The legislature is reconvening for a very short special session to deal with only 2 issues. One is budget, and the second is police accountability. We are trying to work with the Black and Hispanic Caucus Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, sorry, to add this legislation to that bill. This has been an issue where Portland, Oregon had voted to end SROs in school. The Chicago Board of Education last night had I think a tie vote or a one vote majority to keep SROs in school. It's a very big issue nationally. Not only are there resources that could be better used for mental health support, but also, particularly for kids of color, the presence of a police officer is a terrifying, trauma-inducing event. And we should not be subjecting our kids, the kids who who are most challenged in many cases in the learning system. We should not be traumatizing them so they can't learn in school. And so that's the position that we've taken, and I'll keep you posted on how that develops.
Great. And Andy, do you have a takeaway for us for these next
That
couple?
wasn't his takeaway?
What two? I just wanted to talk about the SRO letter.
Julie doesn't want me to go twice.
Julie, you were not the
It's
director of
fine.
this show.
The
What's your
takeaway,
takeaway, Andy?
the takeaway is you've got great advocates on the state and on the federal level, and these advocates need your active support in order to do their jobs. And
Nice.
so join us.
Great.
Nice.
Jeff,
Well, I have two takeaways. The first is just really because we have Denise on, COPA is really an amazing organization. And I don't mean this to be a selfless plug here, but really for those of you that are watching at the parent, attorney, or advocate level, you really should get involved with COPA. I've had the pleasure of attending the last several years, presenting there. It's an amazing organization with a wealth of knowledge, mentors, and professionals that deeply, deeply care about kids and their rights to special education. Regardless of what level of school engagement we're going back to next year, while we take a break from this program, Seek This Week, I think that each family should really start to think about their own set of circumstances. Each family has to really consider what your child's going to require on an individual basis with regards to their education and related services for next year, and then to start planning how to accomplish that. And that's going to take advocating. It's going to take connecting with professionals and individuals and connecting with resources in your community. We hope that you consider Seek to be a resource within your community, and it's going to require patience and persistence. So let's get through this together. Let's enjoy the summer, and we're going to come back with more knowledge for you to better empower you to advocate for your child.
great. Thank you, Jeff. Denise, what would be your takeaway?
Well, thank you. I guess I would have a couple as well. One is certainly to remind everybody that COVID-19, though it changed many things about our daily lives, it did not change your rights. It did not change your child's rights. And so those are still there. Your voice is still important in terms of protecting them. And that goes for not only individual decisions in the IEP, but also big decisions like how the transportation works or how the schools reopen, policy decisions at the local or state level. And so just to echo what Julie said, it really is important to really think of the different layers of advocacy and voice raising that you can do, your own child, your local level, your state level, your federal level, and combining with others can really amplify your voice and be a great way to affect change. I also want to follow up on something that Jeff said and Jen said, and Andy, so I'll touch everybody's, and that is that one of our former board members used to say that COPA is everywhere. The voices of students with disabilities and their families need to be heard. And the only way that we can do that, we have a staff of 5. So the only way we can be everywhere, we are at lots of different levels, is because of the people in our organization and the amazing time and expertise that you give to the organization and to each other. So I thank you for that. And I hope that, as Jen talked about, you know, that hopefully the benefits of distance mediations and IEPs can continue. I do hope that we can really move forward in a new era of partnership and a new era of really valuing and honoring parents' role in this process and their voice and their decision making about what's best for them and their child. And last but not least, COPA at the national level has always been very concerned with police in schools because for all the reasons Andy mentioned, but also because too many schools are now using them in lieu again of behavioral services. I'm glad to hear about the webinar that you're having, and we really believe that every school should have the resources that they need to serve the students well, and to make sure that they have what they need in their building to allow them to succeed. So many issues.
Freezing a little bit, Denise. Denise, hello? She's still frozen. All right, well, I'm sure she'll come back to us. So, but I usually don't do a takeaway, but I'm going to do one tonight because I read something that I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. During all this time, we are hearing from all these different sources. We're going to school, we're not going to school, it's safe, it's not safe, it's whatever. Your kids are watching you and they pay attention to what your behavior. So just check yourself a little bit once in a while. Just as a parent, because I tend to be a little dramatic in my kitchen, and I read the thing and I blow up, and then, you know, it's just, I know you can't imagine it, but it does happen, trust me. So, because if I'm saying there's no way I'll ever send him blah, 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 and then my kid listens to that and says, well, I'm not going, you know. So it was great advice, I thought, when you get that information, process, do whatever you need to do to make you feel good for your child. But whatever the plan is going to be, you need to sell it to your kid as the right plan, right, no matter what it is, because they will watch you. They are smart. So please just do that. Check yourself a little bit. Just remember they're always watching. So Denise, you're back with us. So I want you to finish up.
I'm sorry, I don't know where we left off, but again, just to say to everyone that progress and change only happens if you raise your voice. You know, work together at your local level, at your state level, and join us at the federal level so that we can keep pushing things forward. And thank you all for what you do every day and every week as part of SEEK. I know it's on top of the 20,000 other things that you do. So we appreciate that. And I know that folks around the country, as well as Connecticut, which is one of our higher member states, even though it's tiny compared to some of the other ones geographically, but we do have a lot of members there, and we appreciate that. So
I think we're the highest state per capita, Denise. And I think that you've got to reconfigure your data to show that Connecticut is #1 in terms of COPA membership per capita.
Okay, I'll check that out, see if you're accurate.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone out there in the audience for joining us tonight, and special thank you, of course, to Denise Marshall, Executive Director of COPA. We again are taking July off for SEEK this week, but we have at least 2, if not more, webinars. So the first one will be July the 9th, financial planning, and then July 16th, behavioral strategies. Get that mask on if you can. So please take a look at our website at seekct.com. And a gentle reminder, we are a nonprofit. We truly appreciate donations in order to cover our operating costs we incur as we continue our mission. Thank you for the panel. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful July. Denise, thanks again.
Thank you,
Denise.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Take care.